Yeah, my story wasn't easy, but I survived what they tried to put me through. And in the end, I got the last word. Sometimes the people who think they know you best are the ones who understand you the least. But let me tell you exactly what happened, because this story needs to be told. My name is Sarah Chen Martinez, and 3 months ago, I buried my husband Daniel in the most unconventional way possible. I showed up to his funeral wearing his navy blue Armani suit, the one he wore on our wedding day 7 years earlier. The gasps that echoed through St. Michael's Cathedral that morning still ring in my ears. But before you judge me, before you think I'd lost my mind in grief, let me explain how I got to that moment. Daniel and I met in the most ordinary way possible. I was 28, working as a junior architect at a firm in downtown Portland, and he was 32, a successful financial advisor who'd just opened his own practice. We literally bumped into each other at a coffee shop on Morrison Street. I was rushing out with my morning latte, juggling blueprints and my phone, when I collided straight into this tall, dark-haired man in an expensive suit. Coffee went everywhere. I was mortified, apologizing profusely while trying to save my soaked architectural drawings. But Daniel just laughed. He had this warm, genuine laugh that started in his chest and bubbled up through his smile. "Don't worry about it," he said, pulling out his handkerchief to help clean up. I needed a reason to buy a new tie anyway. That tie was silk, probably cost more than my rent, but he acted like it was nothing. We ended up talking for 2 hours in that coffee shop, both of us completely forgetting we had morning meetings. He was different from anyone I'd ever dated. Where other men seemed intimidated by my ambition, Daniel encouraged it. When I'd work late on a project, he'd show up with dinner from my favorite Thai place. When I got my first major client, he took me to celebrate at the nicest restaurant in the city. He made me feel like my dreams mattered, like I was worth investing in. Our wedding was small but perfect. Daniel insisted on paying for everything, even though I wanted to contribute. "Let me do this for us," he said. "I want our day to be exactly what you've dreamed of." And it was. The ceremony was at a small vineyard outside the city, with just our closest family and friends. I wore my grandmother's dress, altered to fit, and Daniel wore that navy Armani suit that made his eyes look like ocean water. But fairy tales, as I learned, don't always stay fairy tales. The first sign something was wrong came about 2 years into our marriage. I'd been promoted to senior architect and was working on my biggest project yet, a sustainable housing development that could change how we thought about urban planning. I was passionate about it, staying late most nights, bringing work home on weekends. I thought Daniel understood. He'd always supported my career before. But one evening, I came home to find him sitting at our kitchen table with a stack of real estate brochures. "I think it's time we bought a house," he said without looking up. "Something bigger, something that says we're ready for the next step." "The next step?" I asked, settling into the chair across from him. "Kids, Sarah, a family. You're 30 now. We can't wait forever." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. We'd talked about children before, but always in vague, someday terms. "Daniel, I'm in the middle of the biggest project of my career. The housing development could take 2 years to complete. This isn't the right time." His face changed then, became something I'd never seen before. Cold, calculating. "There's never going to be a right time with you, is there? You'll always have another project, another promotion, another excuse." Excuse? The word hit me like a slap. My career isn't an excuse, Daniel. It's my life's work. And what about our life's work? What about building something together? We fought that night, really fought, for the first time in our marriage. I went to bed angry, and he slept in the guest room. The next morning, he apologized, brought me coffee in bed, and said he understood I needed time. I thought we'd worked it out. I was wrong. Over the next few months, the pressure intensified. It started small, comments about my coworkers, questions about why I needed to travel for site visits. suggestions that maybe I was taking on too much. Then it escalated. He'd schedule dinner with his family on nights when I had important client meetings. He'd make plans for us without consulting me, then act hurt when I couldn't attend because of work commitments. "You're changing, Sarah," he'd say. "You're not the woman I married." But I wasn't changing. I was growing, evolving, becoming the architect I'd always dreamed of being. The woman he married had always been ambitious. He'd just chosen to ignore it. The breaking point came when I was offered a partnership in the firm. It was everything I'd worked for. Validation of years of 60-hour weeks and constant learning. I called Daniel from the office, practically vibrating with excitement. "They offered me partner," I said the moment he picked up. Can you believe it? Me, a partner at 31. There was a long pause. "Congratulations," he said finally, but his voice was flat, emotionless. "Daniel, is everything okay? We need to talk when you get home." That conversation is burned into my memory. I walked into our apartment expecting to celebrate, maybe crack open the bottle of champagne we'd been saving. Instead, Daniel was sitting on our couch with his arms crossed, looking like he was about to deliver a diagnosis. "I can't do this anymore, Sarah." "Do what?" "Be married to your career, because that's what this is, isn't it? You're married to your job, and I'm just the guy who pays half the bills and keeps the bed warm." I stared at him. "That's not fair, and you know it, isn't it? When's the last time we had a real conversation that wasn't about your work? When's the last time you asked about my day, my dreams, my needs? I ask about your work all the time." "My work, yes. But what about me? What about us? What about the family we talked about having? We can still have a family, Daniel. Partnership doesn't mean I stop being a woman." "Doesn't it? Because from where I'm sitting, you've already chosen, and you didn't choose me." I felt something breaking inside my chest. This is who I am. This is who I've always been. If you can't handle being married to a successful woman, then maybe the problem isn't me. He stood up then, and for a moment I thought he might leave. Instead, he walked to our bookshelf and pulled out a photo from our wedding day. He stared at it for a long time before speaking. "Look at this woman," he said, holding up the picture. "Look how happy she is, how radiant. She was ready to build a life with me. She wanted the same things I wanted." "I'm the same person, Daniel." "No," he said quietly. "You're not. And I don't know how to love who you've become." Those words hit me like a physical blow. I don't know how to love who you've become. As if my growth, my success, my fulfillment of dreams we talked about together had somehow made me unlovable. We separated the next week. I moved into a small apartment downtown, close to work. Daniel kept our place, the one we'd chosen together, filled with furniture we'd picked out and memories we'd made. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Daniel hired the best lawyer his money could buy, a shark of a woman named Patricia Hawthorne, who seemed to take personal pleasure in dismantling my life. They went after everything, my partnership stake, my retirement accounts, even my car. But worst of all, they went after my reputation. Suddenly, stories started circulating about my work habits, my obsession with success, my inability to prioritize family. Someone leaked information about my projects to competitors. Clients started asking uncomfortable questions about my availability, my commitment. I realized Daniel wasn't just trying to divorce me, he was trying to destroy me. But I fought back. I hired my own lawyer, a brilliant woman named Maria Santos, who specialized in high-asset divorces. "He's trying to punish you for being successful," she said during our first meeting. "We're not going to let him." The battle lasted 8 months. 8 months of depositions and accusations, of having my character assassinated in legal documents, of watching the man I'd loved try to take everything I'd worked for. But in the end, justice prevailed. The judge saw through Daniel's tactics, awarded me what was rightfully mine, and even ordered him to pay my legal fees. I thought that was the end of it. I thought we could both move on with our lives. Then came the phone call. It was a Tuesday morning in March. I was in my office reviewing plans for a new sustainable housing project when my phone rang. Unknown number. Sarah, this is Patricia Martinez, Daniel's sister. I hadn't spoken to Patricia in over a year, not since the divorce was finalized. We'd been close once. She was the one who'd introduced me to Daniel, actually. They worked together at his financial firm. Patricia, hi, how are you? Her voice was shaking. Sarah, I have some terrible news. Daniel was in an accident yesterday. A car accident on Highway 26. He didn't make it. The world stopped spinning. Everything went silent except for the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. Daniel was dead. My ex-husband, the man I'd loved and fought with and ultimately divorced, was gone. The funeral was scheduled for the following Saturday at St. Michael's Cathedral, the same church where his parents had been married 40 years earlier. Patricia called me the night before to let me know the details, and that's when she mentioned something that would change everything. Oh, and Sarah, I know things ended badly between you and Daniel, but I think you should know. He never changed his will. You're still listed as his primary beneficiary. I almost dropped the phone. What do you mean? I mean, he never updated his will after the divorce. Legally, everything goes to you. His house, his business, his life insurance, everything. The lawyer says it's ironclad. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Daniel, about our marriage, about how it ended. I thought about the man who'd supported my dreams in the beginning, and the man who'd tried to crush them at the end. I thought about love and resentment and the thin line between them. But mostly, I thought about that navy suit. It was hanging in my closet, the one item of Daniel's I'd somehow ended up with after our separation. He'd left it at my apartment after one of our last attempts at reconciliation, and in all the chaos of the divorce, it had been forgotten. I'd kept meaning to return it, but every time I looked at it, I remembered our wedding day, remembered the man who'd promised to support me through everything. Standing in my bedroom at 3 a.m, staring at that suit, I made a decision that would shock everyone who knew me. I was going to wear it to his funeral, not as a gesture of disrespect, but as a statement. Daniel had tried to convince the world that my success had made me less of a woman, less worthy of love. He'd painted me as cold, ambitious, unfeminine. Well, I was going to show them exactly who I was, and I was going to do it wearing the suit he'd worn when he promised to love and honor me. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical Pacific Northwest weather. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, adjusting the tie that had taken me 3 YouTube videos to learn how to knot properly. The suit fit surprisingly well. Daniel and I were closer in size than I'd realized, and with some minor adjustments, it looked like it could have been tailored for me. I drove to St. Michael's in silence, my hands shaking slightly on the steering wheel. I knew what I was about to do would cause a scene. I knew people would whisper and judge and probably think I'd lost my mind. But I also knew that Daniel had spent our last year together trying to diminish me, and I wasn't going to let him win, not even in death. The cathedral was packed. Daniel had been well known in the Portland business community, and it seemed like half the city had turned out for his funeral. I parked at the back of the lot and took a deep breath before walking toward the entrance. The whispers started before I even reached the doors. I could hear them, see the shocked faces turning to stare as I walked up the stone steps in Daniel's navy Armani suit, my hair pulled back in a simple bun, my makeup understated but perfect. Inside, the whispers became a buzz, then a roar. People were pointing, craning their necks to get a better look. I held my head high and walked down the center aisle, looking for a seat. That's when Daniel's mother, Eleanor, stood up from the front pew and turned to face me. Her face was red with rage, her eyes blazing with fury I'd never seen before. "How dare you," she hissed, loud enough for half the church to hear. "How dare you show up here dressed like that? Have you no respect for the dead?" "I'm here to pay my respects," I said calmly, "just like everyone else. Dressed like a man? Dressed in his clothes? This is a funeral, not some twisted fashion statement." Other voices joined in. Daniel's brother Marcus stood up, his face contorted with disgust. "You don't belong here, Sarah." You made Daniel's life hell, and now you want to make a mockery of his death? You destroyed our son, Eleanor continued, her voice getting louder, more hysterical. You turned him against his family, against everything he believed in. And now you have the audacity to show up here dressed in his suit like some kind of perverted tribute? I felt every eye in the cathedral on me. Some faces showed shock, others disgust. A few showed what might have been curiosity or even admiration, but most showed exactly what I'd expected, judgment. You don't belong here, someone called out from the back. This is for people who actually loved him. Leave, another voice demanded. Have some dignity. But I didn't leave. Instead, I walked to an empty pew about halfway down the aisle and sat down, crossing my legs at the ankle the way Daniel had taught me was proper for formal events. I folded my hands in my lap and looked straight ahead at the altar, at the casket draped in white roses that held the man I'd once planned to spend my life with. The service began, despite the tension crackling through the air like electricity. Father Mackenzie, who had married Daniel and me 7 years earlier, delivered a eulogy that painted Daniel as a devoted son, a successful businessman, and a man of deep faith. He mentioned Daniel's commitment to family values and his traditional approach to marriage and life. I wondered if Father Mackenzie remembered our wedding, remembered the vows Daniel had made about supporting my dreams and ambitions. Probably not. People have selective memories when it comes to the dead. After the service, as people filed out for the burial, Eleanor Martinez approached me again. This time, her rage had been replaced by something colder, more calculated. I don't know what game you're playing, she said in a low voice, but it ends here. You got your money in the divorce. You don't get to torture our family anymore. I'm not trying to torture anyone, I replied. I'm simply here to say goodbye. In his suit, the suit he wore to marry you before you destroyed him. Before I destroyed him, I felt something snap inside me. Eleanor, I loved your son. I supported his dreams, encouraged his business, stood by him through every challenge. The only thing I did wrong was refuse to give up my own dreams to make him feel more like a man. You chose your career over your husband. I chose both. Daniel was the one who demanded I choose. She stared at me for a long moment, her eyes filled with a hatred that took my breath away. Well, I hope your career keeps you warm at night, because that's all you'll ever have. The burial was held at Rose City Cemetery, a beautiful old graveyard overlooking the Willamette River. I stood at the back of the crowd gathered around the gravesite, still wearing Daniel's suit, still enduring the stares and whispers. As they lowered the casket into the ground, I thought about the first time Daniel and I had talked about death. It was about 3 years into our marriage, after his father had a minor heart attack. We were lying in bed, holding each other in the dark. Promise me something, he'd said. If anything ever happens to me, promise you'll live your life fully. Don't let anyone tell you who you should be or what you should want. Be the amazing woman I fell in love with. Standing there watching them bury him, I wondered if he remembered that conversation. I wondered if, in his final moments, he remembered loving my ambition instead of resenting it. After the burial, people began to disperse. I was walking back to my car when I heard someone call my name. I turned to see Patricia Martinez, Daniel's sister, walking quickly toward me. Sarah, wait! I stopped, bracing myself for another confrontation. But when Patricia reached me, her expression wasn't angry or disgusted. She looked curious. Why? She asked simply. Why the suit? I considered giving her a simple answer, something safe and conventional. Instead, I told her the truth. Because Daniel spent our last year together trying to convince everyone that my success made me less of a woman. He wanted the world to see me as cold, unfeminine, unworthy of love. This suit represents who he was when he loved me for exactly who I am. I wore it to remind everyone, including myself, that a woman can be powerful and feminine, successful and loving, ambitious and worthy of respect. Patricia stared at me for a long moment. Then, to my complete surprise, she smiled. He did love you, you know. Even at the end, when he was so angry and hurt, he still loved you. That's why he never changed the will. Deep down, he knew you deserved everything he could give you. Then why did he fight so hard to destroy me? Because he was scared. Scared that you didn't need him anymore. Scared that your success made his accomplishments seem small. Men like Daniel, men who grew up believing they were supposed to be the providers, the leaders. It's hard for them when the woman they love surpasses them. So he tried to tear me down instead of building himself up. Yes, and I think in the end he realized that. I think he realized he'd lost the best thing that ever happened to him because he couldn't handle being married to someone stronger than he was. We stood there in silence for a moment. Two women who had both loved and been hurt by the same complicated man. The will, Patricia said finally. You know everyone's going to contest it. Let them try. Daniel made his choice, and now I have to make mine. What are you going to do with it all? The house, the business, the money? I thought about that question for days afterward. Daniel's estate was worth just over $2 million, including his financial planning business, the house we'd shared, and a substantial life insurance policy. It was more money than I'd ever imagined having, enough to change my life completely. But more than the money, it was vindication. After a year of Daniel trying to paint me as a heartless career woman who destroyed our marriage through selfishness and ambition, his own final legal document proved that he'd never stopped believing I deserved everything he had to give. The will reading took place the following Wednesday in the offices of Hartley, Peterson and Associates, Daniel's estate attorneys. The conference room was packed with Martinez family members, all of them shooting daggers at me with their eyes as the lawyer, a distinguished older man named William Hartley, read through the document. To my beloved wife, Sarah Chen Martinez, he read, his voice formal and steady. I leave my entire estate, including all real property, business interests, financial accounts, and personal belongings, with the exception of the specific bequests listed below. Those specific bequests were small, sentimental items for family members. His mother got his father's watch. Patricia got his collection of first edition books. His brother Marcus got his golf clubs. But everything else, everything substantial came to me. The room erupted. Eleanor Martinez stood up so fast she knocked over her chair. This is impossible. He wouldn't do this. Not after everything she put him through. I'm afraid the will is quite clear, Mrs. Martinez, Hartley said calmly, and it was executed properly, with witnesses and notarization. Mr. Martinez was of sound mind when he signed it just 6 months ago. 6 months ago, Marcus demanded. But they were already divorced 6 months ago. Nevertheless, this is his most recent will and testament. Mrs. Chen Martinez is his legal heir. I sat quietly through the chaos that followed, the accusations and threats and promises of legal challenges. I felt strangely calm, like I was watching it all happen to someone else. Later, after the lawyers had ushered everyone out and the threats of litigation had subsided into grumbling, I found myself alone in the conference room with William Hartley. They'll contest it, he said matter-of-factly. You know that, don't you? Can they win? Unlikely. Daniel was very specific about his intentions. He even included a clause stating that if anyone contests the will, they forfeit any bequest they might have received. He shuffled through the papers. He also left a sealed letter for you. Would you like me to read it? Or would you prefer privacy? Privacy, please. He handed me a cream-colored envelope with my name written in Daniel's familiar handwriting. I slipped it into my purse without opening it. I wasn't ready, not yet. That evening, I sat in my small downtown apartment with the letter on my coffee table, still unopened. I'd poured myself a glass of wine, the good wine Daniel had introduced me to during our marriage, and I was trying to work up the courage to read his final words to me. When I finally opened it, my hands were shaking. My dearest Sarah, it began. If you're reading this, then I'm gone. And you're probably wondering why I never changed my will after our divorce. The truth is, I tried to. I made appointments with my lawyer, started the paperwork, told myself you didn't deserve anything from me after what you'd done to our marriage. But every time I sat down to write a new will, I couldn't do it, because deep down I knew the truth. You didn't destroy our marriage, Sarah. I did. My insecurity, my need to feel like the most important thing in your life, my inability to celebrate your success instead of resenting it, that's what destroyed us. You were exactly the woman I fell in love with. Brilliant, ambitious, passionate about your work and your life. I was the one who changed. I was the one who decided that loving me meant giving up everything that made you who you are. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the way I treated you in those last months. I'm sorry for trying to diminish your accomplishments. I'm sorry for making you choose between loving me and being yourself. Most of all, I'm sorry for not being strong enough to love you the way you deserve to be loved. The money, the house, the business. It's not enough to make up for what I put you through, but it's what I have to give. Use it to build the life you always dreamed of. Use it to prove that a woman can have everything, that success and love aren't mutually exclusive, that being ambitious doesn't make you less worthy of happiness. Be the woman I fell in love with, Sarah. Be the woman I was too foolish to keep loving. Forever yours, Daniel. I cried that night for the first time since his death. Not just tears of sadness, but tears of relief, of vindication, of closure I hadn't even known I needed. Daniel's final gift to me wasn't just money or property. It was acknowledgement. It was an apology. It was permission to stop carrying the guilt I'd been hauling around since our marriage fell apart. The legal challenges came as expected. Eleanor Martinez hired a team of lawyers to contest the will, claiming Daniel had been under duress or suffering from mental illness when he signed it. They dragged up every ugly detail of our divorce, every argument we'd had, every moment of our failed marriage, but the will stood. Daniel's lawyer testified that he'd been completely lucid and determined when he'd updated his estate documents. The sealed letter I'd shared with the court, after much deliberation, showed his clear intentions and sound reasoning. After 3 months of litigation, the judge ruled in my favor. I inherited everything. The first thing I did was sell Daniel's house. Too many memories, too much pain. I used that money to start my own architectural firm, specializing in sustainable housing for low-income families. It was the project I'd always dreamed of, but never had the resources to pursue. I kept Daniel's financial planning business, but I restructured it completely. I hired women advisors, focused on helping female entrepreneurs and divorced women get their financial lives back on track. Within a year, we doubled the client base. But the most important thing I did was establish the Daniel Martinez Foundation for Women in Architecture. Every year, it provides scholarships for young women pursuing careers in architecture and engineering, with a special focus on those who face pressure to choose between family and career. At the foundation's first scholarship ceremony, I wore that navy blue suit again. This time, no one whispered or stared. This time, they applauded. Standing at the podium, looking out at 20 brilliant young women who would never have to choose between love and ambition the way I did, I felt Daniel's presence. Not the angry, insecure man he'd become at the end, but the man who'd fallen in love with my dreams and promised to support them. Success, I told those young women, is not something you have to apologize for. Ambition is not something you have to hide. And love, real love, celebrates your achievements instead of diminishing them. After the ceremony, a young woman approached me. She couldn't have been more than 22, with bright eyes and calloused hands that spoke of late nights in the studio. "Miss Chen Martinez," she said, "I wanted to thank you, not just for the scholarship, but for showing us that we don't have to choose, that we can be successful and still be worthy of love." "What makes you think I'm worthy of love?" I asked, genuinely curious. She smiled. "Because you loved yourself enough to fight for who you are. And that's the kind of love that attracts the right person." Walking home that night, I thought about her words. I thought about Daniel, about our marriage, about the ways we'd both succeeded and failed each other. I thought about the woman I'd been when we met, the woman I'd become during our marriage, and the woman I was now. I was all of them: the ambitious architect, the loving wife, the successful businesswoman, the grieving ex-spouse. I contained multitudes, and I was finally okay with that. 6 months later, I met James at a construction site. He was a contractor working on one of my housing projects, a man who got genuinely excited when I explained the passive solar design, features, and rainwater collection systems. When I told him about my foundation, about Daniel, about the suit and the funeral and everything that had led me to that moment, he listened without judgment. "You wore his suit to prove a point," he said when I'd finished the story. "Yes. What point was that? That a woman can be powerful and feminine, successful and loving, ambitious and worthy of respect." He smiled. The same warm smile Daniel had given me in that coffee shop years ago. But this smile was different. It held no conditions, no expectations, no demands that I be smaller to make him feel bigger. "Did it work?" he asked. I thought about the foundation, about the women I'd helped, about the young architects who would graduate without ever believing they had to choose between love and success. I thought about the man I'd buried in that cemetery and the peace I'd finally made with our complicated love story. "Yeah," I said. "It worked." Daniel's grave sits on a hill overlooking the river, marked by a simple granite headstone. I visit sometimes, usually on the anniversary of our wedding, wearing different suits from the collection I've built over the years. Powerful suits, successful suits, suits that say I belong in any room I enter. The last time I was there, I brought flowers and a copy of Architectural Digest featuring my latest project on the cover. I told him about James, about the foundation, about the life I'd built from the ashes of our marriage. "Thank you," I said to the headstone, to the wind, to whatever part of Daniel might still exist somewhere. "Thank you for finally seeing me." As I walked away, I thought I heard his voice on the wind, the voice of the man who'd loved me before fear made him small. Be the amazing woman I fell in love with. I smiled, adjusting my jacket, and headed back to my car. I had a business to run, a foundation to grow, and a life to live. I had work to do, and for the first time in years, I knew exactly who I was doing it for: myself. And that, more than any inheritance or vindication, was worth everything.